The Biden administration says that illegal border crossings are nearing the highest level in 20 years.
Growing crisis on the border. Over 15,000 unaccompanied minors now in U.S. custody, 5,000 of them with Border Patrol. Immigration authorities still struggling to find places to hold them.
The southern border towns are feeling the full impact of the migrant surge.
The Department of Homeland Security now says it's deploying more agents amid the new migrant influx.
Be declaring a state of emergency for a crisis that he says President Biden has created in his town by dropping off busloads of migrants.
Title 42, which authorities now say could lead to a record 10,000 illegal border crossings a day.
Now, we've heard the Biden administration claim that extreme progress has been made down here at the border, but that's just not squaring up with what we're seeing on the ground. We want to show you this remarkable drone video we shot today with our crew up in Del Rio. Take a look at this staggering footage.
Still, the president refuses to call the situation a crisis.
We begin with the southern border bracing for a potential surge of migrants.
Border agents say more than 550 unaccompanied migrant children cross the border every day.
Encounters at the southern border hit the highest total for a single day ever recorded.
12,000 people in a single day crossing the border illegally.
You just witnessed a snapshot of the 4 years of open borders policies that set off the largest wave of illegal immigration in U.S. history under the Biden administration. The same open borders policies that overwhelmed border towns, overwhelmed American cities and small towns alike. The same open borders policies that resulted in the deaths of women like Laken Riley and Rachel Morin and the 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungaray. And now we have a new president, President Donald Trump, who took executive action on day one to start the work to secure America's borders again. And the changes have been dramatic. Come with us as we meet with rancher John Ladd, who owns a cattle ranch along the border in southern Arizona, where he has dealt with tens of thousands of illegal aliens crossing onto his property. And then we're going to head to the Cochise County Sheriff's Office, where they're going to talk to us about the sort of things that they've seen coming across the border over the last 4 years and what has changed in the last couple of months. And then from there, we're going to drive all the way to San Diego, California, where we're going to meet with San Diego County Supervisor Jim Desmond. And Jim has been against the radical sanctuary policies in California and San Diego. And remember, San Diego is the place that we saw all those massive street releases of illegal aliens. And now there's a new way that they're coming into the state. So follow along with us and see for yourselves what exactly is happening at America's southern border right now.
The first stop on our trip to find out what has changed at the border was to visit John Ladd, who owns a cattle ranch along the border in Cochise County, Arizona. During the height of the border crisis under the Biden administration, he says hundreds of illegal aliens crossed his ranch every day. John Ladd described in detail to us the nightmare he lived through for 4 years under the Biden administration and how things have changed so far under the Trump administration. The difference is night and day.
Yeah, my name's John Ladd. I'm a fourth-generation rancher in Cochise County in the southeast corner of Arizona. Our south property boundary is the international boundary.
Now, John, thinking back a year ago on your property, what was life like in regards to illegal crossings on a daily basis?
Well, we had about 100 a day crossing. We had no border patrol because they were at the station processing other illegals from different parts of Arizona. We had a huge problem with load vehicles that were coming down here from Phoenix to pick up people, illegals, and then high-speed pursuit. It was pretty much the worst it ever been down here. And then it's completely opposite right now with the last month of Donald Trump being president again.
President Trump has moved aggressively to follow through on his campaign promises, as we know, especially to seal off the U.S. border to migrants and asylum seekers. And his administration is now crediting its sweeping crackdown for a dramatic drop in illegal immigration. Last month, the Border Patrol recorded the lowest level in illegal border crossings in at least 25 years.
Now, with President Trump in office, you're happy with what you've seen so far. Is there anything else that you want to see from him in this administration? Or is there anything you want to see Congress do to help secure our borders so that what happened under President Biden never happens again?
Well, all of the above, and I think Donald Trump is on the right track, but the tariffs, I think, are good for not only Mexico, but for all the other countries, Canada and Europe, and it's time that we take care of America, and securing both the northern and southern border is the first step, because there's a lot of terrorism coming in. We've had several cases. We've had 27 different nationalities being caught on our ranch, but securing the borders is number one, and I don't know. I'm not very optimistic the Democrats are smart enough to figure out what they're doing. But as far as Donald Trump goes, I agree with darn near everything he's come up with. And his first 4 years, the border was absolutely secure. And in the first month, it's as good as at the end of his first term. So I'm expecting bigger and better things.
How fast did things change between the end of the first Donald Trump administration and the Joe Biden administration? You know, just how quickly were we able to just shift from having a secure border to having one that's wide open?
Well, you go back to when Biden got elected, we had 5 groups the next morning that had come across. We hadn't had any groups during Donald's 4 years. Overnight, it affected it. That Donald Trump gets reelected this time, it had happened. It didn't happen as quick, but within the first week, we almost had 0 illegals coming. Mm-hmm. But it's within days or hours of how it changes, and the cartel knows that. And so when Trump got elected, don't come. Mm-hmm. So it's immediate almost.
Over the past 4 years, were you dealing with just a lot more crime than you had normally in this part of the country, or?
Well, it wasn't so much the crime, but the load vehicles. The last number I heard, there were 16 residents of Cochise County that were killed in the high-speed chases in car wrecks. And the biggest thing for us on the ranch was there was a lot more cut fences and water damage, pipelines and all that. But I limit myself to talking with the illegals, but they absolutely, the worst attitude, disrespectful, and just throwing you the finger every time. And their whole mentality is Biden wants us here. He invited us. And we don't care what you think. That was the worst for me, and in my family, was just the disrespect that they were coming with.
I'm curious, John, if President Trump were to ask you, what are some things you still want to see happen, what would you tell him?
Well, and that question came up from J.D. Vance. He said, what should I do? And I said, just do what Donald Trump did his first 4 years. But I think my only, and I'm not sure if Tom Homan isn't going to do it, but there needs to be consequences for American employers that still hire illegals. And I think that's coming. But the E-Verify system, that's a joke. You can go back and 7 or 8 people have the same Social Security now, and it's somebody that's been dead for 30 years. But there needs to be a lot of accountability in that. And then most people don't I don't know if I'd say it that way. I think there needs to be a legitimate work program for people wanting to come to work, where it's 6 months or nothing permanent. You want to come work for 6 months, pay your taxes, go home, then we can do it. But that's what we need. We need a legitimate work program.
Are you old enough to remember the Bracero?
I am.
And was that affected a bit? Is that sort of the
yes,
kind of thing that
that's why I still have that opinion, because it did work. And well, we've sponsored 3 guys to be citizens in my lifetime, and even before we sponsored them. And what disabled that system was the U.S. and Mexico fighting over what they were withholding from the pay. And the U.S. was just as bad as Mexico, and that's what they got rid of the program. But that works, and we do need them. There isn't any doubt about that.
Now, at the height of people coming onto your property as they were crossing the border, do you know much information about the nationalities of those people? Was it primarily human smuggling, or was it human smuggling narcotics? What exactly was coming over the border?
Well, when it started it started after Reagan gave amnesty. And then they didn't, the deal was he would give amnesty, but we'd enforce our laws. Well, that didn't happen. Originally, it was mostly Mexicans. And then it got into Guatemalans and San Salvadorians, but most everything down to South America, Central South America. During Obama's terms, 8 years, we were getting Middle Easterners, which was a little unusual. And then on Biden's deal, like I said, 27 nationalities, but I hadn't heard of any Middle Easterners, but a lot of Polish, Scandinavian, and we didn't have any Chinese either, but Arizona did have quite an influx of Chinese at Yuma. But basically the Northern Triangle in Mexico is what we're getting now, and probably 80% of that is from Mexicans coming.
The people who were coming across, were any of them ever armed?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And going back to that deal, that up until our sheriff started the border interdiction team, probably 6 years, maybe 7 years. But it was basically for drugs, and we had 3 or 4 mule trains, human backpackers, a week, and they were always armed. I haven't seen any evidence of guns probably for the last 5 years on our ranch, but that's always, you can't take that for granted.
How do you feel about Governor Katie Hobbs and her response to the border crisis, and the state legislature as well? Are you satisfied?
No, she's a social worker, and she's open border. Spent $300 million reuniting people with their families that are already here. Democrats at the state, they're more or less open border, want federal funding for everything. We've got a handful of good Republicans that are trying to enforce federal law, and they are anti-illegal or immigrate. What's the word? They're against illegal immigration. But once again, the Republicans can't unify, and we do have a slight majority, but we still can't get stuff passed because we got some rhino Republicans, or however you want to say it. But Arizona it's purple now. A lot of people from California are here now voting. And so Arizona isn't unified at all, but that we've got a lousy governor.
Has Border Patrol given you any idea of the total number of people who crossed the border onto your property under the Biden administration? Do you have an idea of that number?
No, but from my numbers, the last 30 years, Border Patrol's caught 500,000 illegals on our ranch.
Wow.
Yeah.
The irony of that, I was always chastised by Border Patrol management when I do interviews, and I was pretty careful about numbers. But I finally said that, you know, they've caught 500,000. And that's talking to agents that are my friends and everything. You know, I got a call from the sector chief, and I thought, he's going to chew me out. Well, he chewed me out because he said, you should have said we only catch 1 in 6. So 3 million have come through the ranch. And I was surprised. He says, I'm going to be pissed at you because actually a lot more than 500,000. And the reason for that is that Sonora has a pretty good transportation system. Right here, we got highway, railroad, buses come in and out. From the border to Highway 92 is 3 miles. And that's the reason that they're all coming here is easy transportation. And there's just nothing you can do about that. It's convenient and easy to get across.
So the people coming across now, you said it's significantly down. It's like maybe 10 a day.
Yep.
Are they catching the 10 a day?
Yes.
Or they are?
Yes.
So essentially, none of them are getting through.
Right. There are very few getaways. That, you know, you can't say anything's 100%, but because the agents are back patrolling, Biden had to shut that down. But we're almost we have about 300 agents here at NACO, and so they're about back to normal. Even going back as far as Donald Trump's first 4 years. So I don't think there's very many gotaways.
After meeting with John Ladd, we wanted to get the perspective of local law enforcement officials who work on the front lines of the southern border. For that, we headed to the Cochise County, Arizona Sheriff's Office to tour the Southern Arizona Border Region Enforcement SABRE facility. SABRE relies on more than 1,000 well-camouflaged motion-detecting cameras to monitor the entire 372 miles of border that Arizona shares with Mexico. Grady Butler from the Cochise County Sheriff's Office explained to us what SABRE is and detailed the state of the border in the county.
My name is Grady Butler, Grady Butler. I'm Public Information Officer for the Cochise County Sheriff's Office SABRE unit.
And so, Grady, can you explain what the SABRE unit does and why it's so vital to border security?
The SABRE unit was first started as detecting drugs that were coming across the border, marijuana, large bundles of marijuana. And eventually it became people being smuggled across. And the local ranchers in Cochise County were kind of like the test pilot for the camera system that we use, because the ranchers had people coming on their land all the time, destroying things, walking through, cutting fences, breaking water mains. So they were ready for some kind of trial. And so the SABRE unit was born by putting cameras on their land, and it became successful. And so it started to grow from that point. And at this point, we're from New Mexico. We have cameras from New Mexico all along the Arizona border with Mexico to California.
Can you talk about the types of illegal aliens that are trying to come through Cochise County? You told us earlier that these are not the people that are giving themselves up to Border Patrol. These are folks who don't want to get caught, right?
When you see on the news the massive give-ups, those happened in Texas a lot and Yuma, Arizona a lot. But what we see here in Cochise County is very different. It's not people trying to seek asylum. It's people that are trying to evade law enforcement. And that could be because they've got a warrant in America, or they've already been deported, or they're from a country of question, or they're on a terrorist watch list. It could be anything. For some reason, they just don't want to be on paper, so they would not just go give themselves up to a Border Patrol agent, but they will sneak across in Cochise County and try to evade law enforcement any way they can. They're dressed head to toe camouflage. If their car's getting chased, they're going to get into a pursuit. They're not just going to pull over. So they try to get away from law enforcement at all costs.
Can you just talk a little bit about why they chose Cochise County? Do you have any idea, or is it, there seems to be some rational reason why they're choosing Cochise?
Cochise County's terrain is a lot different. There's a lot of desert, but there's also mountainous. So it's a place that can sneak. Cochise County has 83 miles of border, and most of that does have a wall, but they'll climb the wall, break through the wall. and in some areas where there's no wall, they just walk around. So this area is determined by the cartels on the southern, below the southern border of how they cross. And in this area, it's to sneak across.
Also, can you talk about the volume of the gotaways that have come through over the recent years?
We have about 1,300 cameras, and we've detected nearly 200,000 illegals on the camera system. Now, we have a 33% apprehension rate. So if you've heard the term gotaway, what that means is we saw them on a camera somewhere, and we told someone, hey, these people are here, but no one actually talked to them or laid hands on them. So they were considered gotaways. So in the administration, that number was 3 million. You can't quote me on that, but we think it might be a lot higher because that's just what we saw on the cameras, not what we didn't see, and we don't know what we didn't see.
Can you talk a little bit about, think about a year ago and compare that to what things are like right now? How different is it in Cochise County?
A year ago, we would see thousands of people on our camera systems in a month. I mean, just thousands. And now it's less than 1,000 in the whole month of January. So the numbers are quite different based from a year ago.
And is there anything that you would like to see policy-wise from either the Trump administration or from Congress that would help support your office's efforts to provide border security?
Sheriff Daniels always says that this starts from DC. That's where the solution is. And he always asks for a unified message because we work really well with state, local, and federal right here in our county. But the federal government was absent in a lot of the procedures and policies that they had. And so what we needed was that unified message, and I believe we're getting that now.
Is one of those things that you think the federal government ought to be doing is to emulate what you have been doing here so that it's not just Arizona, not just Cochise County, but the entire length of the U.S.-Mexico border has a similar sort of system in place?
I can't speak to the federal government, but Tom Homan was here, and he was impressed with Cochise County Sheriff's Office system and the SABRE unit, and he said, why isn't this being done on a federal level? So you can take from that what you want.
Cochise County, you've got these, it sounds like a very sophisticated smuggling operation that goes on here. What kind of prices are people paying to get across the southern border as a gotaway?
Below the border is the Sinaloa cartel, and Mexican citizens pay typically around $8,000 to cross, and if you're coming from another country, say China, it could go up to $20,000 or $30,000 to cross. And a lot of people that are trying to cross are looking for their better life and they want to work, but most of them don't have that $8,000 in their bank account. So they go into modern day slavery is what Sheriff Daniels calls it, with the cartel. They have to work it off, and that could be running drugs, could be the sex trade, could be construction in some other state. So they have to work off that $8,000. And so when they get to those places, they're working for the cartel. Their checks are issued by the cartel. They have to cash those checks at a cartel business, and they're always taking a cut. So what they have left over is what they get to send back home and live on. So they're probably not going to pay off that debt for a long time.
I think one of the most interesting things that you guys told us earlier that really goes to show the community impact of this is the fact that a green light here isn't really a green light when you're at a traffic light. Can you tell us why that is?
Let me back up a little bit. The cartel is telling the drivers to evade law enforcement at all costs. So we have pursuits in Cochise County, 3 to 10 a day. I mean, just constant pursuits. And our community, unfortunately, is getting used to those pursuits. So when a light turns green, as you were talking about, we don't just go. We look to make sure nothing's coming, and then we'll go. So you'll see people pausing at green lights all the time in Sierra Vista. If you're not from here, you're probably honking behind them going, why aren't you going? But our community is used to it, and that's not a good thing.
And you were talking earlier about recruiting people, including kids, to move people away from the border. And some of these pursuits involve just, as I said, high school kids with driver's licenses.
Most of the pursuits that happen here in Cochise County are American citizens, and they're recruited by the cartels on social media, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, and they promise them money, and it's real money. It's like $1,000 per person that you can smuggle from the border to a Phoenix safe house, let's say. So if you put 5 people in your car or 10 people in your car, you're making $5,000, $10,000 in a trip. And so they geofence around high schools to put these ads out. And these ads are everywhere. You may have encountered them yourselves for people to come down here. So we have people coming from all over the United States to smuggle. So the people that are smuggling the illegal immigrants are American citizens. And as you mentioned, some of them are as young as 12 years old. I think we've had a 12-year-old. We've captured 16-year-olds that have told their mom, we're going to go to Jack in the Box for an interview, but they're actually down here smuggling. And they're in stolen cars, they're in mom's cars, they're in grandma's car, and so there are consequences to those. And when they get caught, they are prosecuted.
What are the typical drugs smuggled here, from most common to lesser common drugs?
Fentanyl. Fentanyl is the national problem, and a lot of fentanyl comes through the Tucson sector, which we're sitting. It used to just be big bales of marijuana, but fentanyl is now the drug that is pouring across our border.
It still is.
It still is.
Drug smuggling is a state and county offense as well, so you can act in those cases.
Absolutely. We have a great partnership with our federal partners, so with the Border Patrol. So if they've pulled over a load car and they don't have anything on the driver, but the driver had some fentanyl or meth on them, they would call us and say, hey, do you want the state charges? And we would take the state charges. Similarly, the other way around is if we pull over a car and it's got illegal immigrants on it, we don't have immigration enforcement at the sheriff's office, so we'll take the fleeing charge and then we'll hand over the illegals to the Border Patrol.
Following our meeting in Cochise County, Arizona, our team went to California to meet with San Diego County Supervisor Jim Desmond. Supervisor Desmond has been an advocate against the sanctuary policies of San Diego and the entire state of California. He told us how the border changed once Joe Biden became president and recounted the mass street releases in San Diego at the height of the border crisis. Even with President Trump working to secure the border, California is still facing illegal aliens running boats onto beaches.
Well, hello, I'm San Diego County Supervisor Jim Desmond, representing North County, San Diego, particularly right here in Oceanside.
Jim, can you start off just giving us an overview of what things were like in San Diego pre-Biden admin and then going into the Biden admin, and sort of what things look like now with a new Trump administration?
Well, pre-Biden administration, we had people coming across of the border, we had getaways, but we had the facilities and the Border Patrol agents to manage what was coming across. There were still getaways that we came into the country, but during the Biden administration, it increased 100-fold or more. It's just astronomical, the numbers that were coming in here. At one point in time, San Diego County, we were the #1 spot in the entire southern border for people crossing into the country, primarily because California put the red carpet out for people to be here. So we witnessed from like September of 2023 to June of 2024, right before the election, we had 155,000 people just dropped off in San Diego County at one of our transit stations in South County. And they were primarily single adults between the age of 18 to 35. We would get several hundred a day, 7 days a week for like 9 months straight. 155,000 is what the number came to. And these people were not properly vetted. They were just dropped off at the transit station by the Border Patrol. And I don't blame the Border Patrol agents. They were just doing what they were told. But they were dropped off at a transit station. There was no bathroom. There was no transportation facilities, expecting them, I guess, to get on trains or in cabs or things like that. And there was an onslaught of people, coming into San Diego County. And then like in June of 2024, a few months before the election, then it started dropping off to about a quarter of that number, but we still had people coming across.
And then now there's been these stories along the coast here in the San Diego area of illegal aliens actually trying to arrive by boat and beaching themselves and running into the community. Can you talk about what's been happening with that?
Well, and that was happening during the Biden administration too. I mean, it would happen before, but to a very lesser extent. But during the pre-Trump days and during Biden administration, we would have boats, several a week, that would just drive up onto our shores, and about a dozen people would hop out and then run into our neighborhoods. We don't know if they were carrying drugs or who they were, and they would just go into our neighborhoods and disappear. Lately, though, however, after with President Trump shutting down the border, so about 95% there's only about 5% of the people coming across now than were during Biden's administration. So now people are still coming across by boat, but it looks like they're coming across in bigger boats and further out. Coast Guard has picked up a few of them, but we used to get people, in these little ponga boats, they would call them, which would hold about a dozen people. Now we're seeing larger rafts and larger boats being intersected by the Coast Guard further offshore, but they do end up just running the boats onto the beaches, when they can at night, particularly on days like today, which are cloudy, overcast days where they can't be spotted very well. These are the types of days where these boats come in. So we are seeing people still getting, not coming across the land portion, but coming by sea. And unfortunately, those people, we have no idea who they are, where they came from, and what their intentions are. They just disappear in our community.
Miles was saying these tend to be people who have the money to pay a lot to the smugglers.
For the people coming by boat are actually paying a lot more than they pay a regular coyote, I guess, to come across the border, because they got to get the boat ride up here. They come across at night mostly, and they pay for people to pick them up once they come into our communities. And one of the things that California, kind of puts this on ourselves, we're a sanctuary state. So that means every city and every community in the state is by de facto a sanctuary city. So a local law enforcement can't do anything to enforce immigration law. So I've had people, my own, people that I represent say, hey, why aren't the police, why aren't they going after, these people as they get off a boat and going on shore and being, picked up in cars? It's because it's an immigration issue. And so our local law enforcement, just by law, by the state of California, can't enforce immigration law. So unless the car they get into, there's some sort of a driving issue or something like that, then they can be pulled over, but not just for immigrating and just coming right into our country.
Now, with this surge in illegal aliens and the combination of sanctuary policies, has the community seen anything like an increase in crime committed by illegal aliens against community members? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's dropped off dramatically here, but primarily most of the crime was theft. Theft and property theft and breaking into houses. People, they get here, they're desperate, they're hungry, they don't know where to go, don't speak the language, and unfortunately they get desperate and start stealing things, from housing in residential areas. And so we've seen that, and we've also seen our shelters for our homeless people, which California still hasn't fixed our homeless population. But the homeless people and having migrants going into those shelters, when we did have the people being just dropped off at the transit stations, some of them were transported, would just go to the airport. And a lot of them would sleep in the airport for maybe a day or two because they can't get a flight out that same day or they're disoriented. So we had San Diego being a tourist destination, the first look and the last look, that people would get of San Diego County is migrants, just sleeping in the concourses at our airport. So it's been a dramatic difference since the Trump administration has taken over. We have not seen, the crime has gone down. The number of people, we've had no people dropped off. Matter of fact, some of the entities that were federally funded here, like Jewish Family Services and Catholic Charities, one of them has already gone under and said, well, we're not having the people come anymore. And what they would do is, help people with transportation issues and things like that. So it was pretty much mayhem here in San Diego County, and it's night and day with the Trump administration taking over.
Did some number of them stay here in San Diego County, or did they all kind of move on?
Well, most of the people from the statistics that we had from the different charities and organizations that helped them, about 90% or more left San Diego County. I would go down several times to the drop-off site where they were being dropped, the transit station, they were being dropped off here in San Diego County, and I talked to some of them, and one guy showed me an address in Virginia. He says, well, how do I get here? And it's like, well, you're far away from Virginia. Or people would say, I'm going to Chicago, or I'm going to Denver, I'm going to some other places. So the vast majority of them, and we have no idea really, but a lot of them would be gone within a short period of time and go to other parts of the country. But we have no idea how many of them really stayed here. I would imagine, maybe 5% or something like that stayed here in San Diego County. But we have no idea because a lot of them just walked in and we just disappeared.
I guess in terms of dealing with the boats, obviously that's more of a federal issue than a state.
And the Coast Guard.
What could the federal government do to address
Well, it
that?
could give us more patrols out here, more Coast Guard presence. But the state of California could do something huge by allowing our law enforcement to stop people from doing this and arrest people, or at least hand them over to ICE or to Border Patrol if they come in our shores. The greatest, to me, the state of California has put out the welcome mat. We give them free health care once they get here. We also, we're paying for their transportation to go to other parts of the country, their airfare and things like that. We give them food. We give them in-state tuition. And so it's like the state of California really kind of rolled out the red carpet and created the fact that we were one of the number one spots along the border to come across, because our law enforcement is not going to ask you any questions, and we'll give you free food and health insurance. So I think that was to our own detriment.
Would you like to see the Trump administration further target sanctuary jurisdictions like San Diego and California?
Well, one of the things my colleagues put forward was to stop or actually put another obstacle in the way of allowing our sheriffs who run the jails here. Our sheriffs used to be able to contact ICE right away and say, okay, we've got this person, and we're talking about high crimes, felonies, and bad serious crimes. We've got this person in our jail, and they're here illegally. They're due to get out in so many months. If you want to come get them or interview them or whatever, come and do that. What my colleagues put in place here in San Diego County, which made us the super sanctuary for a period of time, it still is going on, is that in order for our law enforcement to contact ICE, they had to get a warrant from a state or federal judge. Now, I have no idea how long that would take, but it's just another impediment. Instead of just calling up ICE and saying, hey, we've got this person who committed these heinous crimes. They committed it, they were arrested, they were sentenced, and now they're in our jails. These are the people we wanted to have deported. So I'm grateful that the Trump administration is deporting those people and coming in to communities like San Diego County. I don't know if they've come in yet, but be able to enforce federal law. And the criminals, talking to Mr. Holman, he was actually here. I got to meet with him. Actually, Vice President Vance, before the election, he came down and visited the border. And I'm happy to see that we're getting rid of the criminal element. And if we don't know their country of origin, to go into Gitmo or some other place. But we shouldn't allow people here illegally in the first place. And then those that are committing crimes, they should be deported right away.
Is there any other policy changes that you would like to see from the Trump administration, or any legislation you would like to see Congress pass?
Well, we need an immigration system that works. We definitely need that, but we definitely want to keep the border secure. We have to keep the border secure. And I think Trump's doing a great job at that. But I like I said, at the federal level, I think we should keep deporting as many of these gangs that have come in here. One of the things in San Diego County I didn't mention, we had about 30,000 Chinese just come across the border. And I'm not sure if they were bad intentioned or not, but when you see one group with that many numbers, is an area for concern. So we got to be able to stop people coming from countries that mean us harm, and be able to put more pressure against them. But I think it's been a great, huge step securing that border and keeping the bad people out. That's the main thing we got to do. Continue on that effort. Yeah, we did just recently after the Trump administration came in. We went to the border and it was quiet. We talked to a couple of Border Patrol agents. Actually, they weren't even Border Patrol agents that were there. It was people in the Army. There were Army representatives there manning the Border Patrol stations. So they were saying, they maybe get 10 coming across at night. But prior to, in May of 2024, when Title 42 was about to be lifted, we went down to the border and there was literally thousands of people on the other side mostly families, young children, and what they're waiting for Title 42 to be lifted so they could be let into the country. And so it was amazing just to see this sea of humanity from around the world right here at the Tijuana border in Southern California. And eventually they were just waiting to be put on buses and then brought in and primarily I would imagine they're asking for asylum.
Now, one more for you. San Diego is a fairly liberal area, and there's sanctuary policies, but the people that are living in the community that were dealing with these street releases that were happening, were they frustrated by what they were dealing with all of these illegal aliens coming in, or were they okay with it?
Absolutely, and it went across the aisle. I mean, it was not a deer in our issue, but a lot of people are concerned. It's like, well, particularly people along the beaches, you've got some really high-end real estate, and just have somebody from the somewhere other part of the world, just walking into your neighborhood or through your property, it was scary. And so I think most of the people want a secure border and want to be able to have the proper vetting, and that's not what was going on. I had people from both sides of the aisle come up to me and say, "Hey, thanks for what you're doing, trying to bring attention to this," because most of our local media did not report on this. We had hundreds a day, 500, 600, 700 a day being dropped off in San Diego for a 9-month period of time, and the local media wasn't, it was kind of business as usual all of a sudden. But both sides of the aisle here in San Diego County agree that we need a better solutions at the border.
I just want to go back to before Title 42 ended. I was actually in El Paso at that time.
Yeah.
And they were actually just opening the gates.
Oh, yeah.
Were they doing that? They let hundreds through. I mean, there would be thousands of people on the other side.
Well, it was more orderly. I'm not sure. I guess, was it kind of a stampede or something like that?
No, it wasn't a stampede. They had thousands of people congregated on the other side.
Yeah,
of the
that's
fence.
what we had too.
And periodically, they would just come and open the gates and let people through.
What I saw, I wasn't there all morning, but I saw they had like 3 or 4 buses would pull up, and then they would load up the bus loads, and they had people actually on the other side lined up. And I'm not sure by what order or whatever they did, but they were. It was orderly, but there was just a mass of humanity and people sleeping there through the night. And one of the things that there was a lot of there was press at that time on our side of the border, and a lot of the people were just handing their cell phones through to be charged, because they ran out of juice or something like that. So they would pass their cell phones over, and the news crews would plug them into their trucks and things like that, and charge it up, and then hand it back to them. And so there was that kind of effort going on. But it was just to see that many families and that sea of humanity, and I know it's. We always like to blame them, but it's us, and it's our problem that we need to fix, and we need to do better at. And that's what I would like to see. I'd like to see people come into our country with their heads held high, with dignity, as opposed to having to look over your shoulder all the time. And that's on us. And I think that's something that I would like to see us, make sure we have something in place, keeps the bad people out, let the good people in, and we do it instead. It takes months instead of years.
2 years ago, when FAIR visited the southern border, it was the height of the Biden border crisis. By December 2023, border encounters reached 250,000, the highest levels ever recorded in a single month. Several days that month, over 11,000 migrants crossed illegally into the United States. Now, March 2025 data shows that 7,180 southwest border crossings were recorded, a stark contrast to the Biden days. Those numbers reflect exactly what those on the ground told us. As the Trump administration continues its work to secure America's borders, FAIR will continue to bring you on-the-ground reporting.